Very good afternoon, Rabbi Isai. The shir today is a very, very important shir. It deals with a topic that anybody who goes into Avodas HaKodesh, especially Rabbanos, or any type of rabbinical position where you're going to have to paskin shelos, this is a shela that relates to the concept of a chol sheyesh bo sakana and the concept of how you mechal Shabbos for this person. Now, I will tell you up front that even though the Gemara does mention that the concept of Pekuach Nefesh to say v'chol sheish bo sakana has definitive makaros, and in fact, in the last year, if you heard the last year, I pointed out to you that the Gemara in Masechtas Yoma, which is in the Marmakomis you have in front of you, does have on the first page, which I have page A, it has the primary two makaros, which are used functionally by the Gedolim in the Gedolei HaRishonim and Achronim when it comes to the mitzvah Pekuach Nefesh, being Derech HaShabbos and all other Isurim. The most famous is the pasuk V'chai Behem V'lo Shiyamus Behem, which is on page number A, when you have the underlined lines. The other pasuk is by Rishim ben Asi, who says V'shomen Esos Shabbos, that Yishmechal Shabbos Achas Kedei Shishma Shabbos Es Harbe, which in the last year, for those who were here or for those who listened to the tape, I pointed out that that was not lost totally from halachic activity. I pointed out that in your Marmakomos, that on page number D, the Ramban already in his Sefer on Halacha, in his Teres Adam, quotes the Baal Halachas Gedolos telling us that that second pasuk, which deals with future concerns of a person's Shmiras Torah v'mitzvos, and justifying Chilul Shabbos now for that purpose of the future, I pointed out that the Ramban learns on page number D, in ironically quotation D on the left-hand side of the page, he learns that that is a unique pasuk for when it comes to saving babies in utero during their fetal period of development, that they're not human beings yet, they don't have the halacha of a full-fledged ish to apply. So fetal life is being saved based upon the pasuk of Rishim ben Asiya. The Chalal Shabbos is now for people who are not human beings yet, they haven't been born yet, because if you save their life now in the fetal context, they'll be able to be Shemesh Shabbos in the future. That's where the Ramban quotes the Bahag Halacha Lamasa. And what makes this important is that Rav Moshe Feinstein quotes this Halacha Lamasa in his various types of Piskei Halachos. So he quotes this, and Rav Moshe says, based upon this, not only is there mitzvah hatzalas nefashos, as the Bahag says, from day 41 on in fetal life, but even from day of conception up to day 40, where another halacha, as I taught you last time I was here, that fetal life is not recognized in many areas of halacha until day 41. When it comes to Pekuach Nefesh, the Bahag says explicitly, and even in the first 40 days, you're supposed to be matzal that baby, if you possibly can, to save the pregnancy. He should be a Shemer Torah mitzvah in the future. So even in the first 40 days, this halacha applies. And predicated upon that, I quoted Rav Moshe Paskining that if there's a chil of hatzalas nefashos in the first 40 days, then the logical sequel is there's a isa of hapal, of abortion, in the first 40 days. And that's Rav Moshe's psak in the West, where Rav Moshe holds. Rav Unterman also held that way, and many Gedol HaPoskim today rely upon that as psak halacha. That's why we are matzal babies, even in early parts of the pregnancy, because of Rav Shimon ben Asay's halacha. But once you're born into this world on day one, the Mishnah says in Masechtas Nida, if you have a 9-month gestation and from day one you're out in this world, you're a full-fledged human being based upon Rov Chazaka. Anybody kills you, the Chai Mrs. Bezdin. The mitzvah Pekuach Nefesh halachically applies to you based upon V'chai Behem. That was basically the tamsis of what we discussed in last week's shir, last time we got together. Now, what I'm dealing with today is a very, very important, substantive question. If you look now to the Chavas Yoas Tshuva, which is basically page 1 of the Marmakomis, the first 4 are labeled A, B, C, D. The first number page is Avad Yosef's Tshuva. This is perhaps one of his longest Tshuvas in Yechavis Das when it comes to the question of Pekuach Nefesh. I'm going to read the question for you, and with it get into this topic very quickly in a very, very in-depth fashion. This is the question that basically was posed to Avad Yosef, and listen to the way he formulates it. He says, Chola sheyesh bo sakana, a chola that has a din of yesh bo sakana, Shemechalav as a Shabbos with a mefurish psak in the Shulchan Aruch is, we'll see very shortly in Shin Chav Ches that you're mechuyed mechalal Shabbos. Even a suffix b'koach nefesh this halach applies. So what is the question? Ha'im tzarichin lihizar, do you have to be careful? Shelo lasos shum malacha, not to do any malacha she'ein bo mishum b'koach nefesh achola, where the chola does not need that malacha to be done now for the sake of their medical care for the pekuach nefesh, which means you have to be very careful what malachas you do for the chola. Those malachas perhaps that facilitate saving them from the pekuach nefesh environment you're mechuyev to do, and those malachas which might make the chola more comfortable and other things, but they're not part of the pekuach nefesh medical activities, perhaps they should be held off to after Shabbos. Or do we say, since we have in the books the Shabbos can be over and for the sake of Pekuach Nefesh, we can even do malachas for the purposes of lightening the load of their pain via surim shachayla, even though these activities are not going to change the matziv of their deathly sake of illness, which means it's not going to prove their matzav of taking away the cholim mesukin part, but it's going to make their ability to have the easing of the pain and the other types of aggravation involved in this type of death-oriented type of sickness. So can we do everything we do during the week on Shabbos, or are we limited? Now, what I want to point out to you is that in halachic literature, we find two specific mekaros that debate this question specifically. And with these two mekaros, we're going to go into the bigger topic. Now, in his tshuva, what Avad Yosef does is a limud, how he writes a tshuva, is he first quotes two different sources that indicate the two sides of the question. For instance, he quotes that the Maggid Mishnah, in his parish to the Rabbin Perek Beis Shabbos, says, Chola sheyesh bo sakana. When it comes to chola that's in a state of endangerment of their life, Mechalav es Shabbos l'chol tzarachav, you're allowed with a blanket heter to Mechal Shabbos for all the needs of the chola, and the Maggid Mishnah emphasizes, Afa pi she'ein sakana b'maniyas hadavish osamlo, even though if you didn't give them these extra types of tzarchei haguf, the sakana would not be enhanced by doing such. It wouldn't have any impact upon the sakana. Nevertheless, he felt carte blanche that you're allowed halach lamasa to do whatever you have to do for the chola, even if what you're doing does not involve the sakana treatment. Nevertheless, once the heter of sakana of pekuach nefesh applies, everything's mutter. That's the opinion of the Maggid Mishnah. He then quotes on the third line that Rashi Masechta Shabbos quotes a different opinion. And what's his opinion? She'ein l'chal Shabbos ella al davar shem lo yasi yistaken lechola. The only thing you're allowed to do for a chola is to give him medical treatment, that if God forbid you would not give him that medical treatment, the actual sakana of the choli would impact upon the chola. From Rashi, it's quite apparent that if you're talking about doing medical treatment, that if you don't administer it, it's not going to impact negatively on the choli shel sakana. He'll survive. It might not be the most pleasant experience, but it's not going to enhance or impact upon the sakana. According to Rashi, I can't do that malacha on Shabbos for that specific Jew. I have to wait till Motzei Shabbos. So if you think about it, this is a major, major machlokes of halach lamasa, how much leniency doctors have or nurses have, or for that matter, even paramedics have in treating a patient on Shabbos. Is it carte blanche, or are you limited to be very careful? Now, normally speaking, before I came to this Avad Yosef Tshuva, the way of answering this question was predicated upon the way he basically sets it up on page 1. And now we're going to come in now to the heart of the topic, and that is a famous machlokas between the Maram and Rottenberg on one side, and the Rashba and the Ramban on the other, Rashba and the Ran on the other side, concerning what does it mean that the Rabbanu Shalom gave us a mitzvah, the Pekuach Nefesh is Deicha Shabbos. What does that mean vis-a-vis our relationship to Shabbos Kodesh? And this is a very famous chakira, but I want you to see the tshuva's inside, because with it, you'll be able to see all the other stuff I'm going to present to you today that you'll find fascinating and very interesting. Now, what I want you to do in the Marmar Kamos is where you see quotation C, count on 3 lines to where it says, Bishelos and Shuvas Marami Rutenberg. You see that? Count lines down from C. We're going to start reading this inside and analyze the Marami Rutenberg. He was one of the great Gedolei Hadar, especially of German and French Jewry, Marami Rutenberg. And this is what he says when it comes to this specific question. He says, Kasov, Ma Shehikshi Mori, the question that was posed by my masters, Let's say, for instance, the doctor said, this specific chola needs a certain type of meat, let's say calf meat, to heal and cure his specific illness. Now, I mentioned this a number of weeks ago, that primarily most of the medical care of the time of the Rishonim, most of the medical care going back even Bizman Hamaroim V'Tanoim, was based upon dietary restrictions. Certain foods were good for you, certain foods were bad for you. If you were sick, certain foods helped you, certain foods basically were negative for you. So primarily theirs was a dietetically food-oriented type of medicine. So over here, the case, the shayla that was posed to the Maram and Rutenberg, if doctor said a certain type of animal, let's say calf, you have to feed this meat to the chola to get him out of a state of sakana. So the question is it mutter, if you don't have any kosher meat available, to call a sheichet and shech the calf on Shabbos, which is an Isa skila, if it was done be'Iser, to therefore give the chola the meat he needs for the purpose of his cure of cholish eish basakana. And the assumption is this type of meat is going to do the job. This is the medicine, in this case, the dietary medicine to cure him. And he continues in the Sheila, now we have an alternative. You might have calf meat, but it was not shechted kahalacha, so it's a din of an avela. Same meat, same category of medicinal refuah, using this meat as the medicine. But there I don't have to mechala Shabbos. I already have available to me non-kosher avela meat to give instead of this. And there's only nisa lav. There's no chi of skila. So what should be the route I should take to treat this person medicinally by giving them this medicinal meat to eat? So he says, Ula devarecha tiksha. And the question which was posed to the Maram Rutenberg, Lama shochtim bayomtiv. And Bechlal, it's a very funny shayla. Why do we shecht on yomtiv? Which involves, when it comes to the Easter of doing malach on yomtiv, which is an asay v'lo sasay. Ve'nochlan nevela shib alav bilvad. Very funny type of shayla, you know. Instead, if it comes to shechting on Yom Tiv, there's an asay lois asay. If I eat an avela on Yom Tiv, there's only a lav, so I'm violating less averos. You can see very shortly how this is thrown out. So somebody asked him that question. You can imagine, today they probably say to somebody, "Mr. Klutz Kesher, and get out of here." But that was asked to him, to the Maram Rutenberg. So he says, let's go back inside. So he says, or you tell a guy, we need a certain type of meat, and there happens to be a bird whose meat is very similar, say, to this calf meat, which might be valuable. So you're telling a guy who doesn't know shchita, kill the bird. There's a machlekes Masechtas Chulin, whether shchitas oif is minatari midirabanan. So relying upon the shchitas of derabanan, you'll tell a guy to kill the bird to give meat. So it'll be an amir la'akim sheila. Elavadai, what must it be? Kevin shatayr hetira echol nefesh b'yamtov. This is the important part. Once the Rabbanan Shem Pasha's bow gave us exeris akasaf, allowing us to do malechas echol nefesh when it comes to preparing food on yamtiv, the pshat is, it is mutter. Harei kamel chol shemutter bo kol malechas echol nefesh. Yamtiv becomes a weekday when it comes to food preparation, of cooking and preparing food on Yom Tiv. In those days, there was no refrigeration, so therefore they allowed themselves the halachic permissibility of shechting fresh meat on Yom Tiv. The fresher the shechita, the more geschmack and more batam that meat is. There's a mitzvah of onik and simchas Yom Tiv. You want to have the freshest and best meat. So if that's the case, once the Rabbi Nisham gave you that dispensation, that malechas achol nefesh is allowed to be done in Yom Tiv, it becomes not only a b'di'evet or lechatchila, and your attitude to the cooking should be as if I'm cooking during the week. Whatever I cook during the week should be allowed to be cooked on Yom Tiv when there's a tzarich Yom Tiv. Basically, he's bringing down the approach that maleches eichel nefesh when it comes to Yom Tiv is huta b'Yom Tiv kimo yimei achol. Go back inside. And he says, and likewise, b'Shabbos shalamadnu b'yoma shepekuach nefesh muta b'Shabbos. When the Gemara darshins based upon various psukim that pekuach nefesh is muta b'Shabbos, kol malacha shilachol sheyesh bo sakana muteres kamo b'chol. It's as if it's a weekday. So whatever malacha you would do on a weekday, you can do on Shabbos when it comes to treating a chola. And therefore, if that's the case, reading of the Maram Rutenberg's Tshuva right over here. Okay, so the fact of the matter is, according to the Maram Rutenberg, he therefore passes when it comes to the Sheila of Pekuach Nefesh being Doicha Shabbos and Yom Tov Yom Kippur Kedoimer. He says it is basically Hutra, and therefore it's Kamo Yom Chol. He compares it to preparing food on Yom Tiv. That's his approach, and therefore in the Sheila posed, I would then have the Hetel Chila to shech that calf, to give him glad kosher meat, even though I have an available, but it's kiyom chol. And he brings down in his tshuva over here that this psak of the Maram Rutenberg is then brought down by one of the famous Talmidim of Maram. The Rush brings it down halach lamasa in Masechtas Yoma. He also brings it down in his tshuva's Rush. Also Hagos HaMordechai, which are also predicated upon Talmidim of the Maram, brings us down halach lamasa. So we therefore see Shemashra b'koach nefesh b'Shabbos l'chol nefesh b'Yamtiv. Sheshneim derech heta gamor v'lo dichel ba'alma. So that's the approach of the Maram Rutenberg. He then brings down that the opposite opinion is articulated by the Tshuvas HaRashba. And in the Tshuvas HaRashba, Nishlo Bezer, listen to his approach, because he's now writing as a reaction to the Tshuva of the Maram Rutenberg. He says, Kasav, he wrote the following, Shamat, I heard an oral tradition, B'Shem Harav, Rabbi Rutenberg, Shahar lahate lishchet b'Shabbos, afilu b'makim she'em shom nevela, v'atam she'amuli b'shma cholish. The reasons that are quoted in this tshuva I find very weak. V'linir, and to me it appears, sha'kol toli b'machlokes, im nomer b'Shabbos t'chuyetz b'chol nefesh ahutra. It's predicated how we paskin that sheila of what was the Rabbanu Shalom's Mesara to us in our right to Mechal Shabbos. Is it the Chuya Hutra? Shimnoma Hutra, because if you say it's Hutra, Eitz Achola, Shoktum La B'Shabbos, Shoktum Chol, then surely, so Dava Pashit, you would Shecht and Shabbos, you Shecht during the week, because it's a weekday. Ukamash Amr B'Yoma, when it comes to the Man Dama Tuma Hutra B'Tzibur, when it comes to Rove of the Kohanim and the Tzibur on a state of ritual Tuma, we have a principle that Tuma can be overridden when it comes to the din of Karbanas Tzibur. So the Gemara says in Masechtas Yoma that if you hold Tuma Hutra B'Tzibur, Shem Nitma Kos, a certain type of kos that's used, for instance, because Dama Kedoimer, even if it became contaminated, the Chiddush is, even Yesh Kos Acher, even if there's another kos that's not contaminated yet, you can use the contaminated kos, because since Tuma Hutra B'Tzibur, it's as if there's no Tuma at this point in time. But according to the Manda Amar, Dechuyehi, but if you say Shabbos is only nidch when it comes to Pikuach Nefesh, Machilin L'cholol Nevela Shutzarich, you then have no choice but to use the option available, the least objectionable option, and then is to feed that person Nevela. Lechel Ve'ein Sheichno Lo, you don't shech because one's an Isalav. The other one is a Sheila performing a Ma'isa Malacha, that's the concept of a Skila. Shebamakim Sheyesh Labasa Lechel, Lo Nechal Shabbos Bishvilo. And he then writes the Rashba Keduma that according to me, Keduma Kemish Oimer, Shabbos Dechuyehi V'Lahutra. So the Rashba positions himself. He holds that Pekuach Nefesh is Dechuya on Shabbos. U'Mekamakam, he says, nevertheless, I want you to know something. Im Eim Shon Nevela. What happens if I don't have Nevela available to me to use? I don't have it. So the question is, what do I do now? Should I opt for Amir La'akum and let the guy do the shechita? Or should I call a tremendous Sheikhet Yisrael and let him do the work? So listen to what he passes. This is also important. Ein orvim l'gai lishchat lo. We don't call the guy to do the shechita kevin shiduchu yetzla because of dichui. Because with Shaninu, we learned in Masechtas Yoma, this is also very important for today's year. The Gemara says when it comes to performing Chilul Shabbos, it says Beferish on Pei Dalit, Ein osin devarim halolu, al yedei goyim, v'lo yedei katanim, ela al yedei gedolei Yisrael. That's the Beferish Gemara over there, which means when it comes to Chilul Shabbos Pekuach Nefesh, use gedolei Yisrael, We'll see how the Rambam's gear. So the Rambam says not just Gedolei Israel. He says we're talking about Mamish Gedolei Olam, not just adults. He's talking about Gedolei Chachameim. The Gedolei Israel should be involved in the process. So we see over here that even according to the Rashba, it's only when you have a choice. If you don't have a choice, then he would allow you to shecht, if you have no other choice, by a kosher sheichet, to give him kosher meat. He brings down also that the Ran, in his specific parish, Mesechtes Beya, held the same way. And therefore, if that's the case, you have to be very careful what you allow a person to do, etc. and etc. Now, in the world of halachic reality, listen to me very carefully. When you had these two shittas on the marketplace, the shita of the Maram in Rutenberg, who says Shabbos is hutra when it comes to pekuach nefesh, and the shita will call henceforth the Rashba's opinion that Shabbos is the chuy when it comes to pekuach nefesh. When those two different polar opinions appeared on the marketplace, go back to the beginning of the tshuva, when you saw what the Maggid Mishnah said, and you saw what Rashi said, the initial assumption of the Lamdish Torah world is that when the Maggid Mishnah allows you to do for Chola on Shabbos everything that you can possibly do, even if it doesn't involve Sakanas Nefashais, but whatever you would do during the week, you should do on Shabbos, he must hold like the Maram, that Shabbos is Hutu when it comes to Pekuach Nefesh, it's a Yom Chol. Once it's a Yom Chol, then logically there should be no inhibitions over here, and everything should be permissible. And the other assumption was, Rashi was very restrictive and says, the only thing you're allowed to do for a chola on Shabbos is that if you don't do it, the person will be in a sakana. That's the only thing that basically is the guidelines. If the person's not going to be basakana, you can't do it, even though you're going to relieve their pain. But it's probably Rashi held like the Shitas HaRashba, that the Shabbos is the Chuy Eitza Pekuach Nefesh, so we become very self-limiting. Only that which is absolutely necessary, we administer with medical care. What's not necessary, we hold to after Shabbos, or you call a guy to do it, but theoretically, you should not be doing it yourself on Shabbos, as a Jew to Mechalel Shabbos for this person. That's the way, normally, in the world of halachic literature, they basically divided the camps and basically formatted how every shita holds. By the time I finish the shir today, you'll see it's not so clear. But there's no question initially, that's the way in Halach Svarim it was formulated, and that's the basic guide when it comes to this. So the obvious question you got to ask yourself is, ultimately speaking, which way do we paskin? How do we paskin this? And what makes life even more interesting, and Torah, so it becomes interesting. If you're really into Torah, you never get bored, is what the Rambam does over here. And that is, look at the second handout over here, the Rambam in page number 1. When you look at the Rambam raises the ante and brings this even into greater difficulty to comprehend. And look at the Rambam's lashon. The Rambam says in Perek Sheni, "The Chuyi Shabbos Eisos Akanis Tefashuk K'Shakol HaMitzvos." Now, once I see that expression, whose name pops up into my mind? The Rashba. He must be holding like the Rashba. A doctor who's an expert will tell us what to do. Safik should tzarech l'chala Shabbos safik ain't tzarech. V'chein amar rofe l'chala Shabbos shachama ain't tzarech. That's called the safik pekuach nefesh. Safik nefesh also l'chala of Shabbos. Shesafik nefesh is deiches Shabbos. So he mentions the chia twice in that first halacha. Now, look at halacha beis. Amdu b'yom haShabbos should tzarech l'kach. V'chein l'shmoni yamim. What happens if the doctors say he needs a prescription of medical care for an 8-day framework, which means there's no question part of the days of this medical care is going to involve Shabbos itself, and it could be, he might even involve 2 Shabbosos if he's starting the medical care on the first Shabbos. Maybe we should hold off the first medical care to Motzei Shabbos to only limit it to 1 Shabbos. You shouldn't say that. As soon as the doctor says there's a pekuach nefesh, a suffix, you start on the first Shabbos, Shabbos, mechalav afilim meir Shabbosos, koshman shutzach v'yesh sakana, a suffix sakana mechalalim. Furthermore, not only are you allowed to do the actual tipulim involved in the malacha of the medical care, but furthermore, malikin lesaner, You're allowed to light the candles to make the room more illuminated for the chayil, or mechabin lefanav, or if he has a problem with the light, to basically extinguish the lights. Sheichten lo, you can shecht. Oifim, mevashlim, mechamol, lochamim, whatever you need, cook, bake, warm up waters. Bein lahashkaso, to give them what to eat. Bein l'rechitzgof, to wash the body. Listen to this. Klalo shel davar. Shabbos legabi chola sheyesh bo sakana. Harehu kechol l'chol hadvar mishut tzarech lahem. Who does he hold like over here? The Maram mi-Rutenberg. Now, quite obviously, you can't hold like both. And that is why, in the tshuva that you have in front of you, which I hope that, if you haven't had a chance to see yet in depth, after today's Shi, you'll chazer over this tshuva. What Rav Yosef does, and this is perhaps one of the longest tshuvas he has in the Yechavis Das. Forget about the fact that Yabi Oima even has a longer tshuva on this topic. But the fact of the matter is, what he shows is that this was the major Kosaleba Rambam in all halachic literature, where everybody tried to guess. So who does the Rambam bottom line hold like? Does it hold that Shabbos is the Chuya like the Rashba? Or does it hold like the Maram Rutenberg that Shabbos is Hutra? And the stira between the Reish and Sefer caused tremendous tumult amongst the Mefarshim. I will tell you that the basic Mefarshi HaRambam, the Magid Mishnah versus the Kesef Mishnah, the way they learned the Rambam as the initial approach to this is the Magid Mishnah based his Shita on the Halacha Beis. That's why he held Shabbos is Hutra. And the leniency I mentioned before, you can do anything that you do on the Yom Chol. He basically based upon this part of the Rambam. The Beis Yosef in his Kesef Mishnah learned the beginning of the Ram Halacha Aleph is definitive. So he learned the Rambam held it's Techuya. At least he said that in the Kesef Mishnah. And later on he repeated that in the Beis Yosef. So that would seem to be where the Beis Yosef's heading over here. Everybody with me so far? Now, what makes the topic very interesting is the next part of the discussion. If you look, Chevra, now, on page 2 of the secondary Marmakomos, I want to show you the Piskei HaMechaber in Hilchos Shabbos Siman Shin Chavtes. Logically speaking, if you want to know where the Rambam is holding and where the Mechaber is holding when it comes to this topic, let's see how the Mechaber paskins when it comes to where the Shabbos is Hutur D'Chuy when it comes to Pekuach Nefesh. So if you look, Rabbis, on page 2, in Halacha Dalid, look at the Lashon, you're going to see something very fascinating. The Mechaber says, Makkah shel chala, which he had defined already as being any makkah inside the body, or any organ in the body that seems to be undergoing certain types of medical problems, is looked upon as a chala sheyesh beisakana. Eina tzarech omid, you don't have to dilly-dally and make cheshbainas, how sick they are, but you can assume if it's an internal sickness, it could have potential endangerment, and since Safek Nefesh is Deich HaShabbos, you shouldn't dilly-dally, ask too many shaylas, and do what you got to do. Shafilu ein sham bechiyim, even if there aren't experts to tell you exactly what's going on. And the Chol doesn't even know what to tell you. The halach is, when people had these symptoms at that time, and there was a certain medical protocol, simlo, you do for this chola, listen to Lashon, Kol sheragilam lasos, turn the page, bechol. Whatever you would do during the week, you got to do now on Shabbos Kodesh. Now, who is the gadol who talked that way? Who? The Magid Mishnah. And who's quoting him now? Who? Rav Yosef Karo in his Mechaber. So it seems, based upon what I presented before, the Mechaber seems to be switching camps. We're in the Kesef Mishnah and the Beis Yosef. He seemed to say Shabbos is the Chuya Eitzah Pekuach Nefesh, and therefore logically the restrictions of Rashi, Masechta Shabbos, of only doing things she'im lo yasa yistaken, does not apply. In Beis Yosef and Kesef Mishnah, he was seen to be paskin that way. When he wrote the Shulchan Aruch over here, what did he write? He said, even dvarim that you would do during the chol can be done on Shabbos or this chola, which means now there's a role reversal, not following Rashi in that chumrah, but now he's following over here the shita of the Magid Mishnah. But he then makes one other provision. But if the doctors have an expertise when it comes to this specific sickness, shemamtim, that the refuah can wait till Motzi Shabbos, Doctors will say, we know this machla. It's an internal machla, but we know for a fact you don't got a mechalo now. You can wait till after Shabbos. Ain't tzarich chilul. In that case, asal chalav alfa pisha machla shechalo. So it means machla shechalo, even though he seemed to imply initially in the halacha before there's an immediate chilul Shabbos. That's if you don't know that you can wait with certainty. Once you know you can wait with certainty based upon medical opinion, this machla ain't going to get any worse now. You can hold off the sophisticated chilul Shabbos and do what you have to do Motzei Shabbos. Once the doctor tells you that, and they're experts, they're mumka, they're bekiyim, and they have that expertise, you can rely upon them when it comes to that specific leniency. So the question is, how did the Mechaba make such a Herculean move over here? I mean, that's the big problem. And what's interesting and fascinating, in the tshuva of Avadia Yosef, he quotes the Chidah later on that deals with the problem. I'll show you what the Chidah is, and you'll read it yourself later on, but there's a very interesting Chidah that takes note of this change of stance. This is Rabbi's on page number 6 of the Marimakamos. And he brings down the Chidah. This is between G and H in your text. La Maran Chidah b'machzik brach in Yerodeya. The Kasav, the Zimnin, the Maran, which means the Beis Yosef, Ruach al Panav Yahaloch, Bechiba HaShulchan Aruch, V'choyze b'masha Kasav b'Beis Yosef, B'rosa Poskim Rabim, Shekichtu v'lehepech. Never saw that before. That the Chidah, who was a Goin Olam, he was an encyclopedist, Shein Kamahu, he says he has found sometimes where the Kesef Mishnah and the Beis Yosef will formulate it one way. When you come to the Shulchan Aruch, all of a sudden the psak is not that way, it's been reversed. He says he has found as a pattern, and I'm not going to question the Bekiyas of the Chidah, that sometimes the Mechaba will switch camps and decide opposite when it comes to the final psak halacha. If he sees more information inferring to him that the psak should not be the way he initially conjured up to be, you can see him changing his mahalech. So what the Chidah is saying is that we shouldn't lose too much sleep tonight and go into an insomnia. How much you see a sticha between the Beis Yosef and here, because he's seen it before, he's lived through it before. Therefore, don't make a big deal about it. So I want to base. I don't want you to have insomnia, Rabbi Yisai. You can rely upon the Chidah to deal with that specific problem. But I want to prove to you now that it's not only this mechaba that implies that he paskins pekuch nefesh huter b'Shabbos, but the two more mechabas I want to show you to basically clinch this psak, and that is turn to page 4 in the Marimakamos, and that is halacha yud beis. If you look in halacha yud beis in the mechaber, this is a very yesodistic piece of mechaber. You'll see the ramifications of this. It's really incredible. Listen to this. Kishmechalin Shabbos al chol sheyesh bo sakana. Mishtadlan shalolasos al yidei ein Yehudim. Make sure, means hishtadlus means you have to make a special effort not to do the chilul Shabbos by goyim, uketanim or small Jewish children, or Jewish women nashim. Ela who should do it? Ela yidei Yisrael gedolim ubenei das. They're the ones who should be the implementers of this. Now, before I go further, what I want you to do, turn back momentarily, is to the first page of this little chaveret to see the Rambam's lashon. I want to show you the Rambam in contrast it. If you look in the Rambam's lashon in Perek Pesach Shabbos, in Halacha Gimel, look at the way the Rambam formulates it. I want to point out something. Halacha Gimel, on the left-hand side. Kish osen dvarim elu ein osen oso lo al yedei nachrim, lo yedei katanim, lo yedei avodim v'lo yedei noshim. So far the Mechaber is pretty much like him. Kedei, and what's the reason? So now the Rambam gives a reason. Kedei shalotei Shabbos kala beinehem, that you shouldn't make it as if Shabbos is quite obviously is something that quite obviously is insignificant, and therefore you're basically having these individuals involve themselves. Who should be involved in chilul Shabbos over when it comes to pikuach nefesh? Who should be involved to show how important pikuach nefesh is on Shabbos? El al yidei gedol Yisrael v'chachamehem. He wants the biggest gadol around to be the first one to Mechala Shabbos, to Lahayrais, how important is the concept of Chilul Shabbos B'Kol Nefesh Bein Deicha Shabbos. If the Gedolei Hador take the initiative, it's going to filter down to the Hamanam. This is a very big issue, and therefore we better take this serious. If you didn't have these people taking the leadership and you had lesser people of lesser stature, or even Goyim, people might say, well, maybe Pekuach Nefesh is not Deicha Shabbos. That's why you're using a guy. Or maybe a Katan, because he's not Chayv Mitzvahs yet. Poor women over here, they're basically always packaged together with Katanim. But unfortunately, in those days, the way Chazal seemed to portray it, women didn't look upon themselves as great Talmidei Chachamos. I wouldn't say the seminary girls would do this today. That I can tell you. They would have tainas on you. But in those days, they didn't have the Torah education they have. So therefore, the Ram always puts Katanim with Noshim together, But the fact of the matter is, let the woman do it. Let the Vaiba do it. But the fact is, the Ram says, I want Gedois Chachamim to do it. V'asalis mameya. I don't want it to dilly-dally Chil Shabbos. And he quotes the pasuk, Sheyasa v'chai behem, v'yamus behem, the famous Rambam. Now, what the Mefarshim point out is where the Rambam opts for Gedolim to do it, the Lashon of the Mechaba is a little toned down. The Lashon of the Mechaba is interpreted to be Elal de Yisrael Gedolim u'bnei das, an adult Jewish man who's a regular Jewish man who's Chayv Mitzvahs. He should want to do it. He doesn't have the prerequisite of using Gedolim, and many Achraim take note of that he turns it down, that you don't have to have the Gadol Hadar be the first one to initiate it. The crucial factor is people who are Chayv Mitzvahs and have knowledge of Torah, they should be the ones to initiate to show the importance of Chilul Shabbos at Pekuach Nefesh. The fact of the matter is, it's known that Reb Chaim in Brisk, who was a Rambam Niker, was marked to be the first one in location to always do the Chilul Shabbos. And when it came to turning or putting off lights, whatever it was, and the Cholab made a request, it was known that Chaim put it off or shut it off or put it on depending upon the need of the Chola. And when the Mechutzafim of Brisk, and there's always Mechutzafim in any Kehillah, challenged Reb Chaim and said, we thought you were a Gadol Hadar, and how can you be maker when it comes to Chilul Shabbos? So Chaim said his famous statement, Ich bin ish a maker in Chilul Shabbos, ich bin a machmim pekuach nefesh. It's the famous statement of Reb Chaim. And if that's the case, quite obviously he took the Rambam literally, and therefore he wanted a lahayrais lahalacha. But you see, the Mechaber says, if that's not available, quite obviously, any gadol, any adult should be the one to initiate this. Now, when the Mechaber appears, there's no hiddur, there's no concept. Jews should do it. Don't use Goyim. That's absolutely a no-no. There's no mention in the Mechaber whatsoever even doing a shinui. There's no mention of shinui. Use a Jew, let him Mechala Shabbos normally without a problem. Now, why am I saying this? Because when you look in the Ramah's comment over here, look at the Ramah. V'yesh omrim, the efshal asais below dichui, ubel icha de shinui, as de shinui. If you're able to deliver, the Ramah says, the medical care without dilly-dallying, without delaying it, and by doing the shinui, you're able to reduce the isa from a deraisa down to the rabbanan, do through a shinui. If you can use the guy to do it without dilly-dallying, without wasting time, do it. And if you notice, the Ramah says, no hagim. In his time in Ashkenaz, when he was the Gadol in Poland at that time, he says that, quite obviously, he was noek, and they were noek, to take this specific tzrichasa, to do shinuyim and use gayim, to reduce the east if you possibly can. Aval, he says, b'makam sheyesh locha sheyisas on Yehudi, but if by using a guy, the guy might dilly-dally unduly, in that case you're going to be wasting time and putting the chol in sakana, ein lasas eidei ein Yehudi, period. Now, what is the lumdus of the machlokes between the Mechab over here and the Ramah? So many Achronim say the following, that if we assume based upon the Rambam and Halacha Dalit, that the Rambam basically switched camps and he passing like the Maram Rotenberg, that Pekuach Nefesh is Hutter b'Shabbos, and I'll bring you another Mechaba very shortly to prove that, if in fact you held that way, so if that's the case, and you can do on Shabbos what you do, be Mechol, because of that reason, once that's the case, there's no need to use a guy. There's no need to do a shinui, because it's totally superfluous. It's Hutter. Now, what the Ramah is telling us is a bigger chiddush. And in this topic, I will tell you right up front There's no Sephardim Keneged Ashkenazim over here, because you find when you map out all the shittas, the Ashkenazim and Sephardim are equally divided. Some in the camp of Hutra, some in the camp of Dechuya. So you have no clear machlokes. You sometimes have in other topics. So when it comes to the Bnei Ashkenaz, they were really in a state of tremendous problem. Mitzad echad, their gadol the Maram Ruber Paskin. I show you the tshuva. The Pekuach Nefesh is Hutra b'Shabbos, but there was a whole slew of Gedolei Ashkenazic poskim, and in the parentheses he quotes, so he's quoting the Azarua and the Shultei Gebarim and the Ravan, who basically held that Pekuach Nefesh is the Chuyu when it comes to Shabbos. So in the Ashkenazic world, you had two different major camps of how we paskim. So what the Ramah says, since we have a machlokes, our minig is to be chayshit for the Dechuya camp, and therefore opt for Shiduyim and Goyim if we possibly can. But that's only with the proviso that the quality care you're delivering to this chola is not undermined and undercut when it comes to using Goyim or Shinuyim. That we will not allow. But if there's no question of dilly-dallying and you can deliver by using a Goy or a Shinui, that's the way to go. The assumption is that Ramah Paskin, the minig of Ashkenazim is Pekuach Nefesh is the Chuya Eitz of Pekuach Nefesh. That's the way they learned the Ramah. And one more thing I want to show you over here, Rabbi Yisai. Look in Halacha Yudalet on the left-hand side of the page. When it comes to the whole question, we started off the shir with this afternoon anyway. Now there's a question, what's the psak of the Mechaber? Shochten lo, he doesn't even wink an eyelid. You go to Shechita once immediately. And Omer, we don't say, Na'lechen vela given a vela to eat. Now, what does that mean, Rabbi Yisai? Who is the paskin like? Sounds to me like he's passing like the Maram Rutenberg, that lichatchila, which therefore would mean a further support to what is he paskening. Pekuach Nefesh is hutra when it comes to Shabbos. But if you needed immediate meat, and the shechita is going to take time, but obviously you're given what's available immediately and given the available because time is of the essence. You can't dilly-dally over here. Now, if that's the case, what we see appearing, at least on the surface over here in these mechabers, is what the Chida took note of, and that is over here. The mechaber seems to be switching camps and holding the Pekuach Nefesh is Hutara, and that's why he says Oisim Kamei Meichol. That's why it seems to Paskin there's no need of Goyim or Shinuyim whatsoever. That's why he says immediately when a Chola needs meat, you go to Shechita, you don't talk about Nevela unless there's an urgency, and the only thing available immediately is Nevela. If you say the Mechaber Paskin Hutula, all these three psukim make sense. And in fact, as the Mishnah Berurah points out in below on the Halach Yudalid, when it comes to the reason that of this Mechaber, so he says, Harbi Tamen Nemra Alzeh, Yesh Oimer Mishum Deshavas Hutra Eitza Pekuach Nefesh. So that's the way some learned what the Mechaber's psak is, and therefore that's how they rationalize it, and that's how they came to understand it. Now, what is interesting to note, Rabbi Yisai, as clear as the Mechaber seems to be in this Mahalech, when you read Avad Yosef Tshuva more barichas inside, you will find that Afal Pikain, they still want to say it could be potentially that he held Pekuach Nefesh is Dechuya. How that's possible, we're going to try to figure out, but the pashtus of the Mechaber and the way that many Gedolim learned it, and I can go through a list of, in Avad Yosef, a list of people who learned the Mechaber this way, they learned Hutralo, and that's the way they learned that Mahalach of the Mechaber. Now what's interesting to note, Rabbis, yes? That's the Ramah's sheet, and not the Mechaber. He says the Rambam says it's Hutra. I'm saying the Ramah says in his Chuvos. Whether he holds it's Hutra or not is a big shayla. He says, the Avad Yosef quotes over here, he said the Rambam Paskan Hutra. And he said the Mechaber Paskan Hutra. He never said he's Paskan Hutra. And the fact is, I will tell you, that when it comes to, some say that the Ramah is quite interesting, because some learn the Ramah Paskin Dechuya, and if you look in the Tshuva, you'll see where they interpret the Ramah that way. If he said, I held Hutra, you couldn't interpret him that way. So he's giving his opinion about the Mechaber and the Rambam, not vis-a-vis himself necessarily. There are Piskei Halachis in the Ramon Shulchan Aruch when it comes to Bris Milah, other things, where he contrasts Shabbos and Bris Milah, and the fact of the matter is there are stiras, and for that reason the Gaon goes wall to try to figure out what is in fact the Shittas Harama when it comes to Bris Milah. Is the Hutra, is the Dechuya, tremendous, and Avad Yosef does a beautiful job recording all the Shittas. But from the Ramovi, it appears for him to go out and to say that Noag means that in his Machaneh, he had two different Shittas. And I quoted who these two groups of Gedolim are. When he says Noga means, that's the way, once you conduct yourself with Shinuyim and Goyim, that's surely a Dechiya Shita. You can't hold Hutra and then use Shinuyim and Goyim. There's no reason to do it. There's no reason to do it. So but you're adding things into it that's not mefurish in them. You know, it's a conjecture. And even Avad Yosef says, at the end of the day, someone wanted to say that, but it's not mefurish in them. Yes?
How would the Rama understand the Gemara that says, which seems to be an accepted Gemara by everybody?
So we're going to get to that very shortly. The Gemara Masechtas Yoma, that's quoted before. So the question is, well, he can say very simply, that in the Gemara you could have had a machlokes Tanoim Amarayim, whether the Chuy of Hut, it's not just a machlokes Rishon, it could be a machlokes. Yeah, rest that Gemara, absolutely. There's no question about it. And the fact of the matter is,
that some of the Rishonim who they themselves hold the Chuya, like the Ran and the Rashba, they all explain that Gemara. They don't seem to. Nobody makes a comment. Oh, this Gemara is only according to the.
Well, quite obviously they're not inhibited because what are they concerned about? What they're concerned about. If you look in the poskim over here, what should be so terrible of doing the if you hold hutra? So why in the world shouldn't you use a guy? Yeah. So over here, the Rishonim who paskin hutra, like the Rosh paskins hutra, says I say you should still not use a guy for two reasons. Number one, if people see you run for a guy to do it, you might send the mistaken psak to people that really Jews should not be mechal Shabbos for cholosh yesh by sakana, and therefore when a guy's available, good, we have a guy. When a guy's not available, Jews might not do. So you basically be machshel people to be machman halacha that later on can cause the person to be sakana tzuma. So that's one reason that you're giving the wrong message. And number two, the second reason they gave is that goyim bechlal, when it comes to speed of medical emergency help, and Ramoshin is Meshach Chuvas and Hatzalah goes with the supposition which the Rishonim mentioned, they are misrashel in Pekuach Nefesh. Therefore, having a guy quality control the sequence and the time frame and everything else, you're putting the chol and sakana, because if the guy's going to be misrashel, where the Jew would have been mamaher, so what are you doing over here? So those are the reasons that even if you paskin hutra, the fact of the matter is, I still wouldn't use the Gemara says when it comes to using goyim, because the reason is because the fact of the matter is that we are sending the wrong message, and therefore, if that's the case, there's a long Taz over here. If you're really interested in the topic about the Gemaras, look in the Taz on Siman Yud Beis inside. It's a homework because I'm serious. It's a very beautiful Yesodis Taz, where he basically says he has less problem with you doing it b'shinui than using a guy. In fact, if you look in the Mishnah Berurah over here, he quotes a little bit of the Taz, where he quotes, when it comes over here, V'chein nohagin, you see in Os Lamed Hey in the Mishnah Berurah, Lamed Zayim, so he says, V'chein nohagim, V'haktaz kasav, the lav minig v'sikenhu, the av sheyochel asos ayda eni Yehudi, Mekomakam HaYisrael Yizarez Bedav Yoser, L'chein im yesh afilu safik atzol yesh l'kada bebeiror, don't even introduce a guy. So the Taz has a whole Musar shmooze, taking those Mamari Chazal, trying to figure out how to miyash of them with those who hold quite obviously Hutra Kedaimer, and that's his basic mahalach. When it comes to a shinui, I'm going to get this a very important chilik very shortly, but one thing is for sure, the Taz held you should not use Gayim, and there's no question that quite obviously he remained with that psak to the end. And the many poskim, in fact, do paskin. That's why we don't use gun. That's why Hatzalah, many Hatzalos, and the Hatzalah in the 5 towns that where I am, we do not use Goyim from the very inception. They didn't use goyim, based upon Rav Moshe's tshuvas on the topic. Rav Moshe, in his topics, in fact, I brought for the Rosh Hashiva over here a Rav Moshe's tshuvas, which maybe you'll photostat for the Chevra, 2 tshuvas on the topic of Rav Moshe when it comes to Hatzalah. If today's Shir, you'll have a greater appreciation in it, where he develops his thesis about Shinuyim, about using Goyim, Akadaimer, while he was Mata Hatzalah. You will see that he accepts the thesis of his Rashlos, or they're not being careful, or basically causing people to mistakenly think that you can't be Mechal Shabbat by using the Goy itself. And he uses that as an advocacy of therefore having Hatzalah do it, because they've tried and they've shown that over time the response time is quicker, and the basically Mozar is a Kedemer. He has 2 beautiful tshuvas upon this, and therefore it's Kedai, but you'll appreciate them after I finish what I have to say over here. Number 2, what I want to point out to you, that's also quite interesting, is in Halacha Yudalid, if you would want to say, is it only because of Hutra? So if you go back to the Mishnah Berurah, let me read something with you. Basically, this is an Os Lamed Tes on the left-hand side of the page. When it comes to Shchita, he says, Ha Beitamim Nemra. Why should you shecht for a chayla on Shabbos? Yesh Mishum the Shabbos Hutra Eitza Pekuach Nefesh, Lakach Sheitu Keder Sheshechta B'Yamtiv, Va'afil Isa Derabanan Ein Machilin El Sabamach Sh'ef Shel Lishchot, Mitam Zeh. So that's one shita. He then brings, however, Ha Berishonim. There are many Rishonim out there, Kasvu, the Shabbos Rak Dechuya. So if that's the case, why not give them the veil like the Rashba says? What do you shecht? Elatamu. The Shemi Yikotz Bachilaso Nevela V'lo Yelchol V'Yistaken. What he points out is we as Jews are psychologically programmed from our early youth to love kosher food and to loathe non-kosher food. You mention a non-kosher lobster or pig, you feel like an intuitive feeling of, I don't even want to think about it, even though the Rambam says in the Shemona Parakim, a person shouldn't say, I don't want lobster or pork because I loathe them. You should say, I'd love them, but the Rabbi Shem was geiz, I shouldn't have it. But that's, in the ideal, theoretical construct. But we have been programmed, when it comes to non-kosher food, to loathe it. There are stories in the Holocaust where Mamish was Bekuach Nefesh. And the Nazis, Yamach Shemam V'Zechon, loved to give us non-kosher food to show disdain for halacha. So there were many people in the Holocaust that they were told by the Rabbanim in the camp, it's Bekuach Nefesh. You're going to die from malnutrition. You're allowed to eat the chaza soup. You're allowed to eat the stuff. And they said, I'd rather die than put that in my mouth. I never had it in my mouth. And they couldn't bring themselves because of the kotz b'achilasa. So in the world of human history of the Jews, those who are pious and from, many of them could not bring themselves, even though pekach nefesh is daicha, to eat things that halach lamasa would be permissible. So he quotes Rishonim, who said, the reason, therefore, it could be that those say, even if there's no veil available, to shech nevertheless, even if you pass in dechuya, shemi yakatz ba'achila nevela v'lo yochel v'yistaken, he'll literally die because he doesn't want to put the nevela in his mouth. The Beis Yosef, he brings down in the Beis Yosef, hevi o tam b'shem haran, the nevela oiva kol gzayis mimeno v'cham me'isa lav de Shabbos. He says, since you have, every time you eat another piece of nevela, there's another lav, while by Shabbos you did the shechita once and you finished, v'otam ayin sham, lefisa bevada mutav lavar lahoshet lo isa ram meshachala isa skila. So if you have a choice of an isa derabanan and isa skila, maybe in that case you should have for an isa derabanan. So he says, v'hinei imachola omesh ein katz b'achila, nevela, v'yesh nevela mezumin lefanav, imutu lishka b'avuro ayin b'achronim. Now what does he mean ayin b'achronim? So what he means is that if you look in the Achronim, what you find is they have the following chakira. Me'ikar hadin, if you're pekuach nefesh, you can violate every lav min HaTorah that is not the 3 chamuros, and kodavis machalas asuris is among the things you can violate. What should be the svara that halach lamasa, even if there's nevela available, still shecht for them? Even if the guy says, lo katz b'achila, I don't care if I eat nevela. Why should you still opt to shech for them? So there is the Nishmas Avraham. You have that available in the library here? All right. So just tell you where to look, Rabbi Yisai, when you look it up. The Nishmas Avraham by Dr. Avram Avraham, which is a compendium of medical halacha. So in Chelek Arechayim, which is the first Chelek of this, in the Shulchan Aruch quote over here on this halacha Yedalid, so he quotes, you'll look it up, Rabbi Yisai, in Os Lamites over here. he quotes the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Waldenberg, making the following comment. Rav Waldenberg says that I want you to know that even if the person is not kotz ba'achila, there's another svara to still opt to shecht. Why? So he quotes the fact that Chazal tell us, based upon the concept of lo nemesem v'nitmasem ba, when it comes to a person not eating machalas asuras, the Torah uses the word timtum halev, that machalas asuras causes a timtum halev. It causes a spiritual destruction of your neshama. When it comes to machalas asuras matamtim es leiv adulum, v'azdik lahazik es nishmas adam, it's going to cause a hezek to nishmas adam, and it seems that the Netziv agrees in his shuvis on the svara of the Tzitz Eliezer, who lived quite obviously before the Tzitz Eliezer, and he says the reason is, once again, the Netziv says, there's one thing when a person is also because there's today's Yom Kippur, that's Isa Machmas Hayom. When the Chefts is a Chefts Machalas Asuras and Avela, that is Mamish Matamtam Libo Shel Adam, and therefore he brings down that if that's the case, the Netziv and the Tzitz Eliezer would opt that even if the person is willing to eat nevelos, why should you do a refuah saguf and kill hanefesh? Rather shecht, and therefore you'll have a refuah saguf and a refuah hanefesh. They give him machalas asuras, you're helping the body, but you're causing a kilkel to the neshama. So therefore, that's the way they seem to be holding a paskening, and that's what the Mishnah Berurah alluded to when it came to the whole speaking about amongst the Achreinim. The Safnas Menech also basically emphasizes this. The only question that you find in the Achreinim, which the Mishnah Berurah deals with, is this a concern vis-a-vis only adult Jews, males or females? What about a little child who's not chayiv in mitzvahs yet? Should we also rather shecht them and giving the vela? So what's interesting and fascinating is what the Nishmas Avram says over here. He quotes the Mishnah Berurah saying, "Le'inyan katan bavade nira tov yosa la'achilo bas and nevela v'lo yashchit adam bavur b'Shabbos." That's the psak of the Mishnah Berurah, and it seems that Achiezer, Chaim Ozer Gavinsky, likewise paskin this way. But then the Nishmas Avram points out he had the problem. But what about what the Netziv said? What about the Tzisla? What about the Kanko Kilkal Nefesh? And logically speaking, Kilkal Nefesh not only applies to an adult, even applies to a baby. I mean, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, when it comes to the halachas of nursing from a non-Jewish nursemaid, based upon last week's parsha, Moshe didn't want to be Yainik from the Mialdas of the Mitzrios, and they quote over there the reason is because Pesh Os Ladab Mashchina, how can they nurture his neshama with non-kosher milk coming from a non-Jewish? So they bring down over there, the Gra brings down the Rashba Kedaimer. It's predicated by the fact that Machalas Asuras and Matamtam Libo Shel Adam, and with the Ramah then passing to Shulchan Aruch, if you have a child who has to be nursed and the mother can't nurse the baby, try to get Jewish women to be the nursemaids to nurse instead. Don't use a non-Jewish, because it will be her milk will be makalkal the neshama of the baby in its infancy. And the Ramah then says, if you only have a non-Jewish woman to nurse, make sure she eats glad kosher food, so therefore the milk that's produced from the food, shesham from kosher sources, maybe that will be the tikkun hadava. So what you see from that specific Ramah, that we are concerned with the baby's neshama when it comes to a nursemaid, it should be kosher milk coming from a kosher woman. So therefore, if that's the case, the concern of the Nishmas Avram makes sense. If in regular achilos we try to have the kosher, so if the person's sick, we shouldn't try to shech to give the child kosher meat. So he says that he asked the question to Rav Arbach. He asked him the question, kosevli, and he says what Rav Arbach answered him, shebeshvil zeh vade osel chal Shabbos v'lo kosher. He says he felt, since you're dealing with Chilul Shabbos, he felt that you shouldn't be Mechal Shabbos for the child. You shouldn't be Mechal Shabbos for a Jew when it comes to Shechita. And he says the Kashi you asked, it's not as shver a Kashi, it doesn't marich over here. It seems that the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah is therefore rebuttressed by the Rav Arbach that you shouldn't shech for a little baby's kashrus. Berksham today, we're living in a society that you have kosher food available in many of the hospitals. So we don't have to go through this in the Sionos. In those days, they didn't have such abilities. But today we have, yes? No, the fact of the matter is we're dealing over here, even if you basically hold Hutra, because macholas asuras don't become not makalkal the neshama. You might be able to eat them. There's no lav in shemayim, but it doesn't become food. But the fact of the matter is the food is still makalkal. Even if you pass hutra, the food is still makalkal. You might not. Yeah. So I'm saying even if you pass hutra, but that doesn't take away the machalas asuras. It might take away iser that's based upon the yom, like Yom Kippur.
But the whole difficulty that they're getting into about is because they have a problem with doing shechita because they hold defuyat. So they want to give machalas asura.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with shechita because I hold hutra. Then you should always give.
So you're saying if we hold hutra, there should be no problem. So what I'm saying to you, it's not so pasha because over here, they still make a chiluk between an iser of machalas asuras is based upon the zman, like Yom Kippur, and that which it's intricately, it's a machalas asuras like nevelos and pig. All of a sudden, because it's hutra means that the kilkul of that machalas asuras goes out of the way. You might not get a punishment shemayim for eating it, but doesn't mean there's not a kilkul in the shama. It doesn't change the essence of a metzias of being non-kosher food. If you hear what I'm saying to you, you can take Shabbos. Yeah. And Easter based upon Zman Yom Kippur, it's no longer Yom Kippur. You have to say there might be a difference between them. But I just want to point this as an aside. Baruch Hashem, today I will tell you, even with kids, we try if possible to give them kosher food. And today with what we have in hospitals, you're able to get around it. But the interesting point I want to share with you today is the following. So far, we had two different camps over here. The Maram's camp and the Rashba's camp. The big test is which camp you put the Rambam in. And ultimately how the Mechaber paskins. And so far, what I've been showing to you, that most of the Mepharshim seem to hold that the Rambam and the Mechaber paskin, Hutra, but I'm going to share with you something fascinating now, which he brings down. And that is the famous Baal Tanya wrote his Shulchan Aruch, and that is the Baal Tanya Shulchan Aruch. And what he points out about Yos is something fascinating. I want you to turn in the Mar Mekamas Rabbi Isai to page number 9, where he quotes the Baal HaTanya. If you look at page 9, quotation B, look what happens when you get to the Baal Tanya Shulchan Aruch. This is quotation 9b. He brings down B'Shulchan Aruch Hagon Reb Zalman, Pasak, Kamagid Mishnah of Shulchan Aruch. His initial approach in Siv Dalet is she'osem b'Shabbos chola she'esh ba sakana kol ma she'ugil la'asais b'chol alva pi she'en sakana klal b'menias hadav hazeh give shal kapan b'chol yesh ba sakana. So therefore, it would seem he's holding hutra, right? Hutra. Look what he continues. He then points out, if you look at Siv Yud Gimel in the same Reb Zalman, kasav sha'Shabbos techui eitzel pekuach nefesh v'lo hutra. So he is paskening something that's totally opposite we saw up until now. He holds Shabbos is the chuya, but his taif is the kula of the Magid Mishnah. Everything can be done, even what you do during the weekday. So how do you reconcile this Rab Zalman with what we've learned up until this point in time? So the genius of Avadia Yosef is, with his gainis and his bekiyas, he says, I have one source that will help us analyze this. And the source of Rabbi is found on page number 8. There's a Chuvas Haradvaz, quotation between F and G on page number 8. When you see what the Radvaz does over here, you will see not only that Rav Zalman following the Mahalach of the Radvaz, but the Radvaz explains how you can hold, at one hand, Shabbos is the Chuya, but take the Kula of the Magid Mishnah to be Tata Desasri. So it says in quotation with a paragraph that says Ches over here, Re'isi lahad Radvaz, Shenishal imuta lasas l'chola sheyesh bei sakana b'Shabbos devar mishein b'em tzorach kol ha'chola, v'heishiv the dov hazeh shani b'machlokas bein ha'poskim, v'ani, it comes to me, which means the Radvaz, ani men ha'makilim, and what is that? Shabbos is the chuya when it comes to sakanas nefashos. Ulachay muter lasais lo afilu devarim she'ein behem tzarech kol kach. What's the reason? She'ef goes into this. Shin lo taso lo devarim she'eish ben katzas tzarech. Yavi lehimana gam devarim she'eish behem tzarech habe. V'hadav yedua she'afilu svek sveka shel pekach nefesh decha Shabbos. Lefichach sheichtem lechayla b'shav'ein machilim v'nevela shuv isa labavad ki shema yeda achayla shi nevela v'yokot tzpa v'yistakein, etc. and etc. What is the crucial line of this Radvaz? The crucial line, Rabbi say, is, which you should underline and emphasize, Shem efsha lo tasa lo dom sheish ben tzarech asas. If you don't do the things, Rabbi say, that are not involved in dealing with the sakana, what's going to happen? You hold yourself back. You might even boneya from those things that if you don't do it, the chol will come to sakana. He claims there was a gedda of concern that once a person unduly is makbid to try to make cheshbonis, what is sakana? What's not sakana? Once you freak out a person having that type of concern, that God forbid, if I miscalculate what's sakana, I might be violating Hilchos Shabbos. What you've done is you've weakened the concept of has been done to such a point that a person might be hesitant even to do things which, if you don't do him, he'll come to mamish sakanas tefashas. So he claims that why he wants to hold, like the Maggid Mishnah, is that once you have a heter to Mechalal Shabbos for this chayla, and there is fakus over here, how much you have to do, you don't dilly-dally, you don't play games, you don't waste time, forget about shinuyim or kedemer, you deliver the services that normally given to a chayla in this type of matziv, even though you're not certain the person will not be mistaken, but you can't have those cheshbonis, because if you start worrying about that, then you might mistakenly think something that's not sakana, which is really is sakana, not do it, and put the chayla b'sakana. So once we pasha in the safed pekuach nefesh is deich Shabbos and svek sveikos, therefore everything that you rogel do to the chayla during the week should be done on Shabbos because of not causing undue stricture and undermining the entire psak halacha. Pekuach nefesh is deich Shabbos. So what you have over here is a marriage of the Maggid Mishnah even be able to survive with those who hold the Chuya. The proof is the Radvaz did this marriage, and therefore Avad Yosef says, if you want to understand Rab Zalman the Baal HaTanya, he basically followed the Mahalach of the Radvaz. If you're unduly careful over here, you might come to kilkulim and mistakes, and once a person dies because of your mistake, you can't bring back to life. Rather opt for the Svek Sveikas Lakula and do what you can normally. Don't start to play games. Now, what I want to point out to you, because I want to finish the shit, because I know some of you have to leave, is that when the question was posed to Rav Moshe Feinstein and to Rav Arbach independently, whether we should play games with Shinuyim, so their approach, despite what the Ramah Paskins, is the following. This is very explicit in their psukim. Anything they say that involves medical treatment of the chol himself, mamish, substantive medical care, in that case, they paskin asa l'shanos. You deliver it the way it's normally done. When it comes to medical care, you do it normally, like you do during the week. In those types of activities that are not involved in the actual medical treatment of the chola, but are things you do behind the scenes, but are not part of the medical treatments, there may be a shinui is applicable if by holding back a little bit, it's not going to hamper the bigger picture of the chola, but that's only in secondary or third category types of activities which don't involve the medical treatment. But when it comes to medical treatment, where the Ramah seems to imply, what?
Like what would be the example? Like writing a chart or something?
Bring a chart, or basically writing information on a chart, or that type of stuff. So there's shinuyim, could obviously, if you don't have to give an immediate prescription, and you have time to write it out or information, so therefore shinuyim, right with the left hand, right with the right hand, that's where shinuyim make a sense. Or putting on a machinery, we can do it with a shinui, with the back of your hand rather with the front of your hand. So whatever involves, where the speed of the activity is involving in support mechanisms, but it's not really, you're not doing the surgery, you're not doing the sewing, you're not doing the actual tipulim themselves, or putting the instruments in the body and doing the investigation. Whatever is putting on the machine, whatever device is involved in the, recording the information later on for future investigation, that stuff they would allow a shinui if by doing it slowly you don't have any impact upon the chola, or putting on the machinery with the back of your hand, the front of your hand, is no big difference in speed, but one makes it deraisa and one makes it derabanan. So the fact is, and I'll tell you something quite interesting to me, the people in Hatzalah, in our community, have an interesting regilis, which was mentioned by Ramosha and other Gedolim, and that is we call a shina, you do it differently than you do during the week. So that's called a shina, reducing from a deraisa down to a derabanan. So some gedolim paskind that if that's the case, you don't want a person in Hatzalah on Shabbos to think, how do I do it during the week and how do I do it on Shabbos? So some train themselves even during the week to do whatever you're doing, b'shini b'Shabbos, to do it b'shinu during the week. So this becomes your regilus. It doesn't change it from being a shinui, which means since most people don't do it this way, it's still a shinui vis-a-vis the global perception of doing this malacha. But to take out of your mind the suffix, whether it's Monday, Sunday, or Shabbos, if you're always doing b'shinui, so therefore, and this is your regilus, it becomes second nature. But that's not when it comes to the medical tipul itself. When it comes to medical tipul, the actual physical, hands-on medical care, that is Gadol emphasize. We don't play with shinuyim, and because we're concerned over here, could be they're very concerned for what the Radvaz said and for what Rav Zalman paskind. When it comes to these types of things, any minimal deviation might make you think and not deliver. Every second for a chola might be the difference between life and death. For you to stop playing games over here to make calculations is a very dangerous thing. Rav Moshe Auerbach was very makbid upon that. I want you to remember at the back of your mind when it comes to this. Once again, Rabbi said, please go through the rest of the tshuva over here. It's a fascinating tshuva. And you have some more stuff over here, the tshuvas on Hatzalah. I want, because some of you might be Rabbanim later on in communities where there is Hatzalah. You should know the protocols and such. Have a wonderful day, Rabbi Yisai. And what? What, for next week? Next week I'm going to go through some of the protocols of Hatzalah over here to just show you how it nimshach. What? Yeah, the Yigdal Moshe. Yeah, we're going to use that because that's one of the first major protocols. And whatever I didn't finish up today, I'm going to basically finish up today. So read this whole tshuva. If you haven't read Avad Yosef yet, read this. And fill in the blanks.